So, I have a question for you about maps.
Okay, wait on me.
If you have a map that gets you from, point A to point B,
Right.
and maybe it's a bit tattered or maybe it takes a slightly longer route, but it works, why would you ever throw it away?
Well, you usually wouldn't.
Exactly. I mean, we cling to the maps we know. And I'm talking specifically here about the maps we use to navigate our own identities.
Oh, absolutely. That's just human nature. Once we have a label or a framework that sort of explains us to ourselves, we defend it fiercely.
Yeah.
It becomes part of our foundation. But what if you realize that the map you were holding wasn't just old, but what if it was actually describing a completely different terrain than the one you were standing on?
And that right there is the terrifying but also really fascinating precipice we are standing on today for this deep dive.
It is.
We're looking at the evolution of how we label and understand neurodivergence. But, this isn't just a dry history lesson about medical books.
No, definitely not.
We are looking at a very specific journey from a label that was, for a lot of people, almost a badge of honor.
Asperger.
Right, Asperger's. Going from that to a much broader, much more complex tiered system. Specifically, ASD Level 2.
And this journey is charted just beautifully in the source material we're digging into today. It's a piece by Jaime Hoerricks, PhD, and it's titled From Asperger's to Architecture, Rethinking Language, Severity, and Self.
From Asperger's to Architecture. I have to admit, when I first read that title, my immediate thought was that we were going to be talking about autistic people who are really good at designing buildings.
You know the stereotype.
Yeah. The quirks, the little
This
professional...
obsession with trains or blueprints.
Exactly. But Hoerricks isn't talking about a career path here. They're talking about a philosophical demolition job.
That's a great way to put it.
We are tearing down the idea of autism as a collection of behaviors, what you do. And we're rebuilding it as a concept of architecture, how you are built.
It is a massive shift. We are completely moving away from what the author calls the era of categories.
The DSM-IV era.
Right, the DSM-IV era. And we're stepping into this modern structural understanding of the mind. And to get there, we really have to grapple with three pretty heavy-hitting concepts today.
Lay them out for us.
So first, the really deceptive nature of using language fluency as a diagnostic tool.
Okay.
Second, the redefinition of severity as a kind of friction. And third, the fundamental difference between behavior and structure.
Let's start with that first one, because I think for a lot of people listening, the term Asperger's holds a lot of nostalgia.
Oh, a ton.
Even today, you hear people say, oh, I'm an Aspie. It carved out this really specific niche for people who were socially awkward but, quote-unquote, high-functioning and highly verbal.
Yes.
Felt like a smart label. So why does Hoerricks look back at that and call it the era of categories?
Well, think about the DSM-IV. That was a diagnostic manual used from the early 90s all the way up until 2013. And it was just obsessed with sorting.
Putting people in boxes.
Clean little boxes. And the defining line, the decisive boundary, as Hoerricks calls it, between being diagnosed as autistic versus having Asperger's was almost entirely about language.
It was the gatekeeper.
It was the ultimate gatekeeper. The criteria specifically asked about timing. Did the child speak on time?
Right.
Did they have a large vocabulary early on? And if the answer was yes, they were basically shuffled right into the Asperger's column.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second here.
Go for it.
If a child is talking early, using complex sentences, maybe reciting the encyclopedia at age 6, isn't that objectively a good thing? Why would a clinician look at a kid with an amazing vocabulary and think, oh, we need to rethink this? I mean, it seems like a sign of robust health.
And that is the exact intuitive leap we all make. And it is exactly where the error lies.
Really?
Yes. Because the DSM-IV assumed that fluency equaled competence.
Wow.
It assumed that just because the output sounded like standard speech, the internal operating system producing that speech must be standard too.
I see.
It treated language like a developmental milestone. You just check off a list, check, they can talk, cognitive structure is normal, move on.
So it's kind of like hearing a parrot recite Shakespeare.
Okay.
The output is perfect, to be or not to be. But the parrot doesn't actually understand Hamlet's existential crisis.
Well, that's a bit of a rough analogy, but it definitely gets at the disconnect. Hoerricks argues this whole approach entirely missed the structural inquiry.
It ignored the architecture.
Exactly. By focusing purely on the fact that speech occurred, the diagnostic model completely overlooked how that meaning was being constructed in the first place.
Okay, so if they are constructing meaning in the standard way, how are they doing it? Because this brings us to a term in the source text that I feel like I've seen thrown around on social media a lot, but nobody actually takes the time to explain it.
Gestalt.
Yes, gestalt.
Mm.
Hoerricks says gestalt names structure. But what does that actually look like in real life? Because usually when we learn a language, we learn it like Lego bricks.
Yeah.
I is a brick, want is a brick, apple is a brick. You stack them together to get, I want apple.
Exactly. That is analytic language processing. That is how the school system assumes every single person learns. You learn words, then you learn grammar rules, and then you build your own sentences.
Right.
But a gestalt processor, which is the foundational architecture for so many autistic people, they don't start with bricks. They start with the whole finished castle.
A whole castle? What do you mean?
They learn in chunks. Whole phrases or sentences that carry a specific emotional meaning or vibe. We often call these scripts.
Yeah.
For example, imagine a child watching Toy Story. They hear Buzz Lightyear say, "To infinity and beyond."
Sure.
In that moment, it's exciting, it's forward movement, it's high energy.
Right.
So later, when that child wants to go to the park or get in the car, they don't construct the sentence, "I want to go." They just say, "To infinity and beyond."
Oh. So they aren't talking about space travel at all.
Not at all.
They're using that whole audio clip basically to mean, let's go.
Precisely. Now, to the untrained ear and to the DSM-IV, that child just deployed a complex, multisyllabic sentence.
It sounds super advanced.
Exactly. Look, they're quoting movies, they have an amazing memory. But structurally, they aren't building a sentence from scratch. They are deploying a gestalt.
Wow. And if you're a doctor in, say, 1999 holding a clipboard, you hear a kid speaking in full complex sentences and you just tick the Asperger's box because their language isn't delayed.
Right. In fact, it seems gifted.
But you've completely missed the struggle underneath.
You've missed that this person cannot generate novel, flexible language to describe their pain or their needs. They can only use the scripts they have collected.
So if they don't have a movie quote for, "My stomach hurts and the fluorescent lights in here are buzzing too loudly,"
they might just remain silent, or they might use a script that sounds completely irrelevant to the doctor, like system failure, and just get labeled as weird or non-compliant.
This is blowing my mind a little bit. Because it implies that the fluency, the very thing that got them the high-functioning label, was actually just a really effective mask.
It was a structural mask, and Hoerricks points out that this misunderstanding led to what they call a quiet violence.
Yeah, that phrase hit me hard when I read the source. The quiet violence of calling architectural difference a deficit.
It's a heavy concept.
But let's dig into that word violence.
Mm-hmm.
Is it really violence? Or is it just, I don't know, a clinical misunderstanding?
Hoerricks argues it's violence because it actively erases the person's reality. Let me give you an analogy. Imagine you are a lighthouse.
Okay, a lighthouse.
You are built tall, round, with a giant, powerful light on top. Your entire purpose is to withstand coastal storms and guide ships.
Got it.
But then the town housing inspector comes by with a checklist meant for a suburban ranch house.
Oh, I see where this is going.
They look at your stairs, way too many. They look at your front lawn, non-existent. They look at your light, way too bright for a living room.
Right.
They don't look at you and say, "Wow, what a magnificent, perfectly functional lighthouse." They say, "This is a horribly broken ranch house. This is a failed version of a normal home."
And that's the deficit model right there.
That is the deficit model in a nutshell. When we view neurodivergence only through the lens of what is missing or what is broken compared to the neurotypical standard, we're committing that quiet violence.
We are telling the lighthouse that its very structure is a mistake.
Yes. So when Hoerricks talks about moving from Asperger's to architecture, they are essentially saying, stop judging me as a failed neurotypical person and start looking at my actual blueprint.
And that blueprint, for Hoerricks, is now officially defined as ASD Level 2.
Exactly.
And this is the part that I think is really hard for people to swallow. Because we live in a society that just values intelligence and independence above almost everything else.
We do.
And the Asperger's label had that little professor shine to it.
Yeah.
It felt adjacent to genius. But Level 2, that sounds like disability. That sounds like I can't do things.
Yeah.
Why would someone willingly trade a smart label for a support needs label?
That is the million-dollar question. And the answer lies in the actual day-to-day reality of living that life. The Asperger's label often actively denied people help.
How so?
It essentially said, you're smart, you're verbal, so you shouldn't be struggling. If you can't hold down a job or keep your apartment clean or handle a grocery store, you're not disabled, you're just lazy.
Oof, yeah. You're just not applying yourself, trap.
Exactly. So moving to level 2 is an act of radical honesty. Just for context, level 2 in the DSM-5 implies substantial support needed.
Right.
It acknowledges that while the person might be absolutely brilliant, their architecture requires specific accommodations to function safely. It's not about being less intelligent. It's about admitting that your load-bearing walls are just different.
Load-bearing walls.
Think about the house analogy again. In a neurotypical brain, maybe the load-bearing walls, the things that keep the whole structure from collapsing, are social connection and task flexibility.
Sure.
For an autistic person, the load-bearing walls might be strict routine, intense sensory regulation, and special interests.
Okay.
If you try to knock down those walls, if you force them to stop stimming, or you take away their safe routine because it looks weird to you, the house collapses.
So accepting level 2 is basically saying, hey, these aren't just quirky little habits you can train out of me. These are the pillars holding up my roof.
Yes, it validates the struggle. And that leads us to probably the most revolutionary concept in this entire deep dive, the redefinition of severity.
This is where we need to throw out the dictionary entirely. Because usually when we hear the word severity, it measures how sick you are.
Right.
Stage 4 cancer is more severe than stage 1. It's a measurement of something breaking inside you.
Yeah.
But Hoerricks writes, and this is a direct quote, severity names friction.
Severity names friction. It completely shifts the location of the problem.
Break this down for us, because friction inherently requires two things rubbing against each other.
Right. Think about a Formula One car.
Okay.
It is an absolute masterpiece of engineering. You've got an incredible engine, highly specialized tires, aerodynamics perfectly designed for maximum speed.
A brilliant machine.
Now take that F1 car and force it to drive on a muddy, rocky, off-road rally track in the woods.
It's going to get destroyed.
Immediately.
The suspension will snap. The tires will just spin in the mud. It will bottom out within 5 feet.
Exactly. Now, in that moment, is the car broken? Is the car severe?
No. The car's amazing. It's in the completely wrong place.
The friction between the car's architecture and the environment is catastrophic. That is severity.
Wow.
Hoerricks is arguing that severity isn't a measure of how autistic a person is in a vacuum. You cannot be severely autistic on a desert island where you are perfectly happy, the lighting is soft, and you can eat your safe food every single day.
Because there's no friction there.
Precisely. Severity measures the drag coefficient. It measures the intense struggle between the person's architecture and the environment they are being forced to navigate.
That reframes literally everything. If I'm a level 2 autistic person and I'm forced to work in a noisy open-plan office with buzzing fluorescent lights and highly ambiguous social rules,
Yeah.
my severity is through the roof. I am crashing.
You are the F1 car sinking in the mud.
But if I move that same person into a quiet, dim room with clear written instructions and noise-canceling headphones,
The friction drops, the severity functionally disappears.
that's incredible.
The architecture of the person hasn't changed at all. They are still exactly as autistic as they were in the open-plan office, but the interaction has changed.
You know, this makes the whole concept of unmasking so much more logical to me now. I always kind of thought unmasking was just relaxing, like taking off tight shoes at the end of a long day.
It's much more active and foundational than that. Hoerricks says unmasking begins there, meaning it begins with understanding your own aerodynamics. You can't unmask if you're still desperately trying to be a rally car when you were built for the track.
If you think you're just a broken rally car, you're going to keep trying to put on bigger mud tires.
Yeah.
You're going to spend your whole life trying to fix yourself.
You're going to keep trying to sand down your own edges to fit into the round hole. Unmasking is finally looking at your blueprints and saying, oh, I require high-octane fuel and smooth tarmac. I am not broken. I am just highly specialized.
But that's terrifying too, isn't it? Because the world is mostly mud.
Okay.
The world isn't built for F1 cars.
It is absolutely terrifying, and that's exactly why the level 2 diagnosis is so necessary. It's a legal and medical recognition that says, I cannot drive in the mud without help. I need you to pave a section of this road for me.
It demands accommodation not as a favor, but as an architectural necessity.
Correct. And it circles right back to why language fluency was such a dangerous trap for so long.
How so?
If you are an F1 car with a really, really nice paint job, meaning if you have high verbal fluency, people look at you and assume you can handle the mud. They don't see the suspension snapping underneath.
They hear the kid say, to infinity and beyond, and think, oh, he's totally fine. Meanwhile, the internal engine is completely overheating.
And that is why Hoerricks calls for this structural inquiry. We have to stop just listening to the words and start listening to the structure. Is this person actually communicating their internal state, or are they just running a script to survive the friction?
It really makes you question how we listen to everyone, not just autistic people. I mean, how many times do we ask someone, how are you in here? I'm fine. And we just accept it. Even when I'm fine is really just a social script.
It's the ultimate gestalt, how are you? I'm fine. It's a ritual. It's not a real data exchange.
Right.
For a neurodivergent person, relying on those rituals can be a literal lifeline to get through the day, but it also creates a massive wall where no one sees the real struggle behind it.
So we've gone from the era of categories where we just sorted people by their vocabulary lists to this entirely new era of architecture. We've learned that being verbal doesn't mean you aren't struggling, and that severity is actually just a physics problem between a person and their environment.
We have. And I think for you listening, the real key takeaway here is to shift your gaze. Don't just look at the behavior, the what. Look at the architecture, the why.
And stop trying to turn lighthouses into ranch houses.
Please. We have more than enough ranch houses. We really need the lighthouses.
Before we wrap up,
Yeah.
I want to leave everyone with a thought that has been nagging me since we started talking about the F1 car analogy.
Oh, what's that?
If Hoerricks is right and severity is just friction, think about the power that gives us.
It's immense power.
Because usually when we talk about mental health or neurodivergence, we focus entirely on treating the person.
Yeah.
Therapy, medication, behavioral training, we try to change the car.
Right.
But if severity is friction, we have another variable we can change. We can change the track.
That is the real provocation here. Can we reduce the severity of a disability simply by changing the architecture of the world around the person?
Right. If we built a world with more smooth tarmac and less mud, would the diagnosis itself change? Would the disability shrink?
It's not just a theoretical question anymore. It's a design challenge for all of us moving forward.
Definitely something to chew on next time you see someone struggling to navigate a space that clearly wasn't built for them. Thank you for diving deep with us.
Always a pleasure.